Hi everyone, welcome to my presentation. If you're here, I guess you're interested either in invasion biology or particularly in hypotheses in the field. So today I would like to present you some of our work on using causal networks to link major hypotheses in the field. Some of the key questions in our field can be summarized here. So some of them are, why do species establish and spread outside their native range? Why do some species become invasive and other not? And why do they sometimes perform better in the invaded compared to the native range, right? And some answers or possible answers to these questions are presented as major hypotheses in our field. And trust me, we have so many of these hypotheses. So some of them you can see here. This is a network built by a consensus of experts trying to see how these hypotheses are similar to each other and how, according to this similarity, they can cluster. And as you can see here, this is only a subset of the hypotheses, but there are many, many more. And that leaves us with so many choices when we want to start working on something in the field. So that is making things rather difficult, right? There are so many choices. Where do we go from here? And part of our work is to try to create maps of the knowledge in our field, to put some order or to give some guidance to people who might be starting, for example, or who might be familiar with some of the hypotheses, but not all of them. So here I want to show you a little bit of the work we have been doing, not only trying to map the knowledge on the hypotheses on invasion science, but also the support each one of these hypotheses have. If you go to the High Knowledge website that you see here in this animation, we have the network that I just showed you, that it was a consensus by several researchers in the field in more or less understanding how similar the hypotheses were and building these clusters, sorry. And here in this website, you can also find the support for each one of these hypotheses based on the book you see here, the invasion biology book on top of my little face. But this, although this is very helpful, there are still some issues with this approach. So we can know like the connections and the overlap between these hypotheses, but we still don't know the underlying hypothesized mechanisms, right? We know how similar they can be in terms of their mechanisms, but not what the mechanisms are. And here is where our proposal comes in. So we think that we can maybe use this causal networks to build this mechanistic information, or to be more explicit about it. And here I've shown you an example of the very start of it for the enemy release hypothesis. So in the enemy release, the hypothesized relationship is that there will be an absence of enemies, which causes invasion success. So the invasive species in the native range doesn't have the enemies that it had in the native range, and therefore that allows them to become invasive. It's given an advantage, right? But we can go more into detail of what we mean by that, and for example, introduce that we mean that the species has been transported into a new range, and the absence of enemies is associated to less tissue damage, enhanced performance, and then invasion success. And we can go even further and say, well, this tissue damage means maybe enhanced growth or enhanced reproduction, and then you have like different pathways to how we get to invasion success. Okay, but how do we go about building this causal network? So first, we suggest that we start by formalizing the hypothesis. So we propose doing it by using a generic structure for the hypothesis, where we have an object, a subject and a hypothesized relationship. And this will be something like for the enemy release hypothesis, if we have a formalized definition, like the absence of enemies in the non-native range is a cause of invasion success or causes invasion success. We can have something like here where we say the absence of enemies contributes to invasion success. And this can be slightly different depending on the person formalizing this hypothesis. Now, if we want to add more hypotheses, so I mentioned already the enemy release hypothesis, but we can also add more hypotheses to build this network. I will present here only 4 because otherwise the network gets too big. So we can also add, for example, the Darwin naturalization hypothesis, which is very well known in the field, which states that low phylogenetic similarity between non-native species and the recipient community increases invasion success. Then the limiting similarity hypothesis, which states that low trait similarity between non-native species and the recipient community increases invasion success. And the diversity invasibility hypothesis, which states that an ecosystem with high biodiversity is more resistant against non-native species than an ecosystem with lower diversity. And the formalizing step can look something like the ones I'm showing you here. So you have, for example, for Darwin naturalization hypothesis, that the phylogenetic dissimilarity from native species contributes to invasion success. And then for the diversity invasibility, that low diversity of native species contributes to invasion success, and so on. And if we want to go more into detail, so remember we had first the connection that you see here in orange, that was that phylogenetic dissimilarity between exotic and natives, or the invasive and the recipient community, increases invasion success. This can get a little bit more detail. What we mean by this? Well, this phylogenetic dissimilarity implies that there is niche differentiation. So this is our hypothesized relationship, which this causes differentiation in resource use and decreases competitive effect of the residents on the invader. And this contributes to population establishment and growth of the invader, and this is a component of invasion success. And also we can also state other ways of reading this, like the lack of phylogenetically related species, and what does that mean. So we can get more into detail. We can get even more into detail in the next slide. So here you can see this sort of washing machine structure here, which is meant to present more population dynamics. So what does it mean, the competitive effect of the residents on the invader? This can be that there is an increase in individual growth or an increase in the number of offsprings and so on, and how this will ultimately influence invasion success, right? And we can then also join or merge the other hypothesis into the network. So what you see here in green is the limiting similarity hypothesis, and then more like turquoise color is the biodiversity invasibility. And so this can be also joined to the network. For example, we merged it here saying that phylogenetic dissimilarity could imply trait dissimilarity. And so there they are, the two hypotheses are similar, are related, and then it goes on to the second part, let's say, of the hypothesis. And here is incorporating also the enemy release hypothesis on top. So it's getting very complicated, but this is mostly to show how we can be connecting this hypothesis according to the mechanisms where we think they sort of merge together. And many of them were probably merged in the case of our hypothesis on this washing machine part that I mentioned regarding the population dynamics. So this is an option. This is our reading of the how to connect this hypothesis, but obviously this will be modified or will be slightly different according to the person who is building this hypothesis. So one thing that I didn't mention, but it's very important, is that if we build this relationship using controlled vocabularies, this also has advantages for the applications of this hypothesis network. For example, we in this example use this super pattern ontology, whereas you can see here you have these relations that are, for example, contributes to, enables, affects, increases, decreases. So this has advantages, which is, for example, they can be read and processed by computer algorithms. They can be used to explain to machines the meaning of terms, and also this allows for automatic disambiguations of terms like non-natives, the same as exotic, let's say, because many times you have the formulation of the hypothesis using different languages. This is something that, okay, the author can decide on having the same language or maybe sticking to the one in the original formulation of the hypothesis. So what are the applications of these causal networks? What we see is that it could be good for facilitating synthesis to serve as a foundation for advanced machine learning, which these versions can be connected to ontologies and can enable AI tools to support causal reasoning, potentially extracting causal inferences for complex data. But we're mostly interested in what you, the person watching this video, is interested in, or what are the applications you see. So I would love to read you in the comments, and any ideas are more than welcome. We want to know what you think about this. So this is all from my side. Thank you so much for checking my presentation, and you can also contact me by email, which is there in the slide. Thank you so much.